Okay, this is a panorama of the major wars in the history of the United States, and virtually all of them were false flags. So here we start off with World War One. To get us involved in World War One, everybody commonly thinks it was the Lusitania. Now, if you look at the German War Embassy in Washington, put an ad right next to the ship ad for traveler on the Lusitania, warning them that they knew that they were carrying shipments of arms and that they would be up for grabs. So when the Lusitania was hit, there were secondary explosions that brought it down. Now, we were itching to get in the war. The world bankers, the Hearsts were, and but that alone didn't do it. It almost tipped it over, but then there was a letter found from the Kaiser promising Mexico, if they started a secondary front in Mexico, that after the Kaiser dealt with England and finished up France, that he would help the U.S. and they would be able to take a big chunk of old Mexico and give it back to them. Well, what he didn't even know at the time, Mexico was going through a revolution. There was nobody to really give the letter to, but this letter was intercepted, and that was the final straw, if you will. So that was the false flag that got us into World War One. And World War One, World War Two is basically World War One revisited, I guess. So the Germans were kicking the hell out of the Russians and the Germans, and the English. And so Churchill and Roosevelt were doing whatever they could to get. So we did the Lend-Lease program, where we were giving arms to both Russia and the British to fight by a proxy war. But it wasn't going to be enough. The Germans would have overrun them. So what happened? The Pearl Harbor debacle was hatched. We put the screws on Japan, who was an ally in World War One. Remember, they were our ally in World War One. And against the Germans, the Japanese kicked them out of the island where the Tsingtao beer is. That was the reason that beers taste better than an average beer from the Orient, is because that was a German base, and the Japanese kicked them out of there. So anyway, they were our ally at the time. So Roosevelt put the screws on oil production for them, and basically goaded them into Pearl Harbor. It's the seminal work on that is by a guy named Gary Victor, who went in to disprove that it was used as a false flag, but it was. Then let's go to Korea. So Korea was the first United Nations war. It is the first police action, and it was brought on by Harry Truman. And it was a policing action. Remember, North Korea. It wasn't the Kim Jong's grandfather, Kim Il-sung, was not put in charge of Korea by China. He was put in charge of Korea by Stalin. So Stalin gave him all kinds of hardware, artillery pieces, a few tanks, and just armed him to the teeth. Well, South Korea wasn't armed at all, so you were asking for a fight. And they goaded it in, and Truman, part of the thing was to give the UN teeth. So that was the first police action war that wasn't supposed to be won. So there's the other one. Now let's go to Vietnam. The sinking of the Lusitania, the sinking of the Maine for the Spanish-America War. They always like to use ships that supposedly get attacked because you can't check on them because they're at the bottom of the ocean. Same thing for those of you who really want to check out the Titanic. There was a sister ship of the Titanic that was supposed to pick up the survivors, but some drunken Russians set off the flares and brought them to the wrong place to pick up the people. But that's another story for a false flag. Oh, and another false flag that didn't take to get us into World War II was the Hindenburg by a guy named Bo Bergdahl, and they fired incendiary rounds against the Hindenburg to try to get to goad the Germans into attacking us. And I've done a video on that, and other people have done it. It's not like it's totally unheard of. So anyway, the Vietnam War was another one pushed by the papers, and it was a big war for the DuPont family to make billions of dollars through war munitions. Then let's go to the Iraq War, the Gulf Wars, and the Iraqi Freedom War. Total oil, the war for oil. So Saddam Hussein, who was put in power by CIA assets, that's why he was hard to get out of. They couldn't get him because he was trained to avoid the assassination attempt. If you want to check out, the economic war and how it's done, he was told they kind of cut a deal with George H.W. Bush, that he could take some of the disputed properties there was some disputed oil land in Kuwait. Well, he took that as so there was a plan where Jordan and Yemen were going to just split up Saudi Arabia, but then we had to stop that because we couldn't let that guy break his promise. So there were some disputed oil wells in Kuwait, and he was supposed to just take those on the deal, but he broke the deal. So the war for oil it was set up ahead of time, and that kept the military-industrial complex going. The war on terror is winding down now, if you will, and the war for oil is winding down since we have Planet Petroleum, if you will. Anyway, that's a history of some of the false flags, and there's many more that I won't be able to cover here, but that's all. I'm out.